How Disney became woke, boring, and evil. Who's behind the attacks on Asian Americans and why? And the Rio Grande Valley, that's the blue part of Texas. How to turn it red. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
The Disney Corporation is going full woke, and in the process, it is burning their brand. This is a company that was once charming and beautiful. It created, in a sense, illusions, but they were positive illusions. And now they have become not just boring, but they're increasingly becoming an instrument of evil, of corrupting the young. By the way, this was a charge that got Socrates fed the hemlock. And I want to talk toward the end of this segment about how to administer in a corporate sense, the hemlock to Disney. This has become a very wicked corporation. Now, I can't forget my first experiences at Disney. I was actually a teenager when I first came to America. And I sort of loved Disney. What an idea. What an American idea. And I think what I loved about Disney most was its celebration of Americana. It showed Americana in all its different guises. The messages were unfailingly amusing and positive, rooted in history. Obviously, it was a simplified history. And it was simplified about America just as it was simplified about other cultures. If you went on the It's a Small World ride, Indians were defined by turbans and Hawaiians by hula skirts. But there were plenty of Indians and Hawaiians going through this experience, and everyone thought it was great. The most important thing about Disney was it conveyed through its stories, and this is, of course, coming out of the very fairy tales that Disney built on, its movies on, its themes on, was the celebration of virtue. Disney was about good and evil. Disney was about wicked witches and beautiful princesses and noble chivalric princes. And so it affirmed our innate sense of good and evil. And it gave virtue a certain patina of loveliness. But in today's Disney, that is all gone. You may say that virtue has lost its loveliness. Now, many years ago, this was on my second or third trip to Disney, I had ordered some food. I was kind of sitting on the side. And I remember seeing a kind of a funny sight, which sort of reveals to me the other Disney, the Disney that is not put on public parade. I sort of saw a Goofy go behind a building, and then he pulled over his kind of goofy outfit, revealing a kind of cynical face. He lit a cigarette and began muttering obscenities. And I was like, wow, that's the real Disney. Those are the people who do this. The whole thing is a facade. Here is sort of obscenity chanting, cigarette smoking, metrosexual, Goofy. I was like, man, if only the kids knew, they would cross the road. Their parents would be like, ah. So that side of Disney is now coming forward. Amazingly, Disney has actually decided to destroy its own illusion, destroy Americana. In fact, to turn Americana itself into the evil one. Americana itself is now the villain. And so that's why Disney is kind of running through all its rides, running through all its programs, essentially removing the Americana. And they're doing it in the name of this sort of global concept of diversity, except it's globally insulting to those of us who have grown up in other cultures, because this is not reflecting our culture. Indian people are very traditional. We affirm traditional values. We prefer the old Disney to the nonsense you're putting on parade now. Now, there's a recent article in the City Journal by Christopher Rufo, which talks about what Disney is doing behind the scenes. They've got these training modules for all their employees. The United States, that this document claims, has a long history of systemic racism and transphobia. White employees must, quote, work through feelings of guilt, shame, and defensiveness to understand what's beneath them and what needs to be healed. There's another module called What Can I Do About Racism? You've got to be aware of, quote, implicit biases. You've got to watch out for microaggressions. You've got to, quote, become an active anti-racist. They tell employees to, quote, reflect on America's, quote, racist infrastructure. And on it goes. 21-day racial equity and social justice challenge. They talk about the fact that participants must learn about their white privilege and fill out a white privilege checklist, including I am white, I am heterosexual, I am a man. Then we move on to white fragility. The program says, if you believe things like, quote, I'm a good person, I'm not racist, I was taught to treat everyone the same, that proves you are a racist. And at the conclusion of this 21-day challenge, you have to learn to, quote, pivot away from, quote, white dominant culture to something different. In fact, they say that themes like individualism, timeliness are, quote, white dominant values that, quote, perpetuate white supremacy. And then finally, they go on to talk about kids and how kids are not too young to talk about race, even at very young ages. They have to, quote, it tells you to decolonize your bookshelf, participate in reparations, find and join, donate to anti-white supremacy work, such as your local Black Lives Matter chapter. So you can see what's going on here. The very people who do the sketches, make the animations, this is the Disney team, is being heavily propagandized by who, by the way? By the 4 white males whose collective worth is over $1 billion who run Disney. This is a case where it is whites that are driving this bus. This is not a sort of multicultural demand that's emerging from all around the world, not at all. This is Disney propagandizing from above. Now, I think it's really important that we take in the implications of this, because what really Disney is doing is they have gone from celebrating the innocence of children to corrupting them. And that means, I realize Disney is a pervasive presence in our culture. It's really difficult to sort of dissociate from Disney. Disney dominates particularly children's entertainment with games and rides and movies and so on. So you've got to think hard about, do you want to encourage this corrupting influence in the culture? And if you do, how do you strike back at it? Well, one way is to essentially develop the habits of discipline that basically say, in ways that I can, I'm not going to subsidize Disney. I'm just going to start cutting Disney out of my life. Why? Not because I'm against diversity, but because I'm against this kind of propaganda that, particularly when it's inflicted on kids of a very young age, corrupts the mind. So the boycott is the first step, but it's not the last step. The last step is, and the more important step, is to make your voice heard. Now, social media allows you to do this. Remember, all these companies, not just Disney, but Delta and Coke, they all have a social media presence. They have Facebook, they have websites. They also have products on Amazon. Think of all the Disney products on all the different purchasing sites. Well, here's what you can do. If you're looking for something to do, go on those sites. Go on Amazon, locate all the Disney products and review them. And by review them, I mean let Disney know what you think about Disney. And also let other people know that in subsidizing Disney products, this is what they're subsidizing. They're subsidizing the very values that will undermine what they believe and will corrupt their children. So this is a destructive company that has a destructive influence in American life, and we have to treat it as such. It's worse than a tobacco company in a sense. That's an assault on your health. That's an assault on your lungs, but it's not an assault on your mind. It's not an assault on your conscience. It's not an assault on your basic sense of right and wrong. So Disney is free to do what it wants, and we are free to do what we want. They're free to try to push their destructive messaging on us, and we're free to strike back in whatever way we can and let them know, but most importantly, let other people know what we think about this. This is a corporation that needs to be taught a lesson, and I hope we can play a small part in doing exactly that. Who is behind the spate of assaults and attacks against Asian Americans? And just as important, why? I was on with Jesse Waters on Fox over the weekend to talk about this. And Jesse Waters fully knows the answer to the first question, which is the who. But he was really befuddled by my answer to the second question, which is the why. So let's go through this. Waters, in fact, laid out a series of horrific assaults against Asian Americans. You have an African American, Patrick Thompson, walking up to and stabbing two elderly Asian women in Market Street in San Francisco. I'm now reading a headline from the New York Post. 2 Asian women beaten with a cinder block in Baltimore. The suspect, Daryl Doles, age 50, African American. A Baltimore man arrested after he repeatedly struck 2 Asian women, 66 and 67, in the head with a cinder block. This was on video. And an arrest was made, and the perpetrator, African American. On and on it goes. An Asian woman was slapped on a Brooklyn subway train by a black female who made racist comments, including the phrase, "You don't belong here." DC police are trying to find a black male suspect who has punched an Asian store owner who says, "F you Chinese people, I hate you." Interestingly, in the media reports on this, there's been a suppression of the race of the perpetrator. And this is to fulfill the narrative of white supremacy. White supremacy is to blame, in fact, I think one of the dumbest Asians in America. This is an anti-Trump Asian doctor. His name is Eugene Gu. He goes, "Black on Asian crimes occur because of our system of white supremacy." So this is, here's a guy parroting the leftist narrative, but that narrative makes absolutely no sense. Whites aren't doing this. It's being done by African Americans. By the way, there's a new Asian American Foundation which lists a series of crimes of violence against Asian Americans. This is called the Asian American Foundation. And interestingly, they name the race of the perpetrator only when the perpetrator is white. When the perpetrator is black, they say nothing. So this is an effort to doctor the facts, to create a false narrative, if you will. But this, of course, raises the question, what is the true narrative? If it is the case, as it is, that African Americans are disproportionately the villains of this story, they're the ones attacking the Asian Americans, the deep question is why? So here's what I said to Jesse Waters. We think of racism, we think of hate crimes as a group that thinks it's superior, attacking others that they deem to be inferior. And of course, racism in America has traditionally taken this form. Whites are superior, blacks are inferior. So you're looking down on another group and you identify, we come to identify racism this way. But there's a whole different kind of bigotry that is resentment and hatred directed at people who are deemed to be more successful. This is racism or bigotry rooted in envy. Somebody else is doing better than you. You are filled with frustration and rage at their success. You don't know why that success doesn't belong to you. Not only is that success humiliating to you, but more importantly, it destroys the excuses for your own failure. You're like, well, I'm African American, and the reason I can't succeed is because no person of color can succeed in America. You see, America's defined by white supremacy. Wait a minute. Here's a Pakistani. Here's a guy from Thailand. Here's a guy from Malaysia. Here's a guy from China. They've all moved into my neighborhood. Their kids are doing really well in school. They're planning to move into the suburbs. They're achieving the American dream. They're destroying my narrative. They're undermining the whole white supremacy gobbledygook. They're basically showing that the American recipe of success works. Now, no one is saying, not for a minute, that Asian Americans are genetically better, Asian Americans are superior. No. Asian Americans are successful because they have, in a sense, embraced a culture which you could almost call the old Protestant work ethic. Confucian culture, whether you want to call it Asian culture or traditional Asian Indian culture, these cultures bear a close similarity to what people used to call the Yankee work ethic, which is basically you have tight-knit families, you study hard, you save a lot of money, you work cooperatively to generate capital, you emphasize entrepreneurial business formation. All of these are the characteristics of successful groups everywhere in the world. So the point I made to Jesse Waters is what we're seeing here is that the least successful group in America, African Americans, are attacking members of the most successful group. And I say most successful group because if you look at any measure of academic achievement or economic performance, there's a huge body of data on this, and it's been collected now over 30 years. You find the results are predictable. Asian Americans are on top, Whites are kind of in the middle. This is why it's so amusing when I keep hearing about relinquish your white privilege, give up your white privilege. I'm thinking whites don't have any privilege. Whites aren't on the top of society. They're not at the top of the rung anymore. So the bottom line of it here is that the presence of Asian Americans, the success of Asian Americans is a, you may say, walking refutation of the idiotic woke narrative. It undermines all this nonsense about structural racism. It knocks it over. And so there's a desperate desire to reconstruct the narrative. They have to trot out this idiot, Eugene Gu. White supremacy is still doing it. They're still doing it. They're making Asian Americans from poor families score higher on math tests than African Americans from middle and upper middle class families. How? Tell us how that happens, Eugene Gu. Now, this all reminds me of the old scene from the movie, and it was Spike Lee's movie called Do the Right Thing a long time ago, where, you got this poor Asian guy, and he starts a grocery store. And all the blacks in the neighborhood are really angry. Why do we have to patronize an Asian grocery store? And Cedric the Entertainer, this big fat guy in the movie, goes, yeah, that's because they work hard, they make stuff, we don't make the same kind of stuff. I'm gonna go over there and get myself a burger. And of course, they ultimately threaten this guy. They want to beat him up. They want to riot against him. And finally, the poor Korean grocery store owner goes, I'm not white, I'm black. Like you, I'm the same. So here's the poor guy trying to identify with his attackers so that he can sort of disassociate himself from the kind of stigma that they're trying to put on him. The point I wasn't able to make with Jesse Waters is this: worldwide, successful groups are targeted for attack. Think of the Jews, for example, in Germany. One of the attacks on the Jews was the fact that the Jews run the banks, the Jews run the institutions of finance, the Jews dominate the media. Jews are successful in all these important professions, and this stimulates the hatred and envy of ordinary Germans who feel they're not doing as well. The overseas Chinese dominate the economies of a whole bunch of Asian countries. They're dominant in places like Thailand and Malaysia. And so the native-born Malay and the native-born Filipinos think, oh, these horrible Chinese, they're so evil, they're so wicked. And so there's a racism that develops toward these groups, but it's not a racism by looking down. In some ways, it's a racism by looking up. You're looking at people who are doing better. And of course, you convince yourself that the reason they're doing better is not because they work harder, not because they have a better cultural ecosystem. It's because they're ultimately wicked. They're managing some sort of conspiracy against us. You have to sort of root them out of the society. So I think my conclusion is that there are two types of bigotry, and they operate simultaneously. One is the kind of traditional bigotry, groups that think of themselves as better, looking down on groups that think of themselves that they deem to be somehow worse. But there's a second, less visible type of bigotry, very much present in this case, where groups that are not doing well blame their difficulties on other groups that are quite manifestly succeeding and claiming their share of the American dream. For most of my life, I thought a pillow is a pillow is a pillow. There's nothing special about a pillow. That is until I discovered My Pillow. Mike Lindell has reinvented the pillow, and what he taught me is that a pillow, like a watch or phone or a car, can be a work of art. These pillows won't go flat. You can wash and dry them as often as you want. They maintain their shape. They're made in the USA. For a limited time, Mike Lindell is offering his premium My Pillows, a signature item for his lowest price ever. You can get a queen-size premium My Pillow for $29.98, regularly $69.98. That's a $40 savings. Kings are only $5 more. All the My Pillow products come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. You'll get deep discounts on all My Pillow products, including the Giza Dream bed sheets, the My Pillow mattress topper, and My Pillow towel sets. Call 800-876-0227 and use promo code Dinesh. Now, Debbie and I were on the website. We were actually listening to the My Pillow jingle, and Debbie's like, I dare you to sing that jingle on your show. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. She's like, I dare you, I dare you. So here you go. For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com. Chorus, promo code Dinesh. With Caitlyn Jenner jumping into the California gubernatorial race. and having made some comments about why biological males should not compete in women's sports, the trans issue has suddenly kind of come again to the forefront. And here is the comedian and I guess now political commentator, Sarah Silverman, making some oracular pronouncements on the issue. Listen.
I saw Caitlyn Jenner saying trans girls should not play girls' sports. Caitlyn, you're a woman, right? A trans girl is a girl. She should have the same rights as cis girls. If you think a trans girl, what, you think a trans girl is too strong? What about tall girls as opposed to short girls? What about boys in high school who are teeny tiny and their teammates have already hit puberty and are shaving? Why don't you just have co-ed sports divided by weight or height?
Now, wow, you have Sarah Silverman, who was, I guess, 7th in the hurdles in 10th grade in high school, lecturing one of the greatest athletes of all time on what it means to be an athlete. Hey, Bruce Jenner, let me tell you something about sports. There's a certain preposterous arrogance in that. But more deeply, I want to zoom into what Sarah Silverman is saying, because it seems to me that on the face of it, she's making an argument against women's sports. Why? Because she's saying, hey, look, you've got fast women and slow men. You've got strong women and weak men. So there are no meaningful biological or physical or natural differences between the sexes. You have the same kind of variation between the groups as you do within the groups. And therefore, why have women's sports at all? Now, interestingly, she doesn't go there. She keeps talking about women's sports. As the clip goes on, she refers to women's sports. In fact, she says she wants to protect women's sports. But this trans issue is, as far as she's concerned, a bogus issue. She goes on to say that any opposition to biological males participating in women's sports is, quote, transphobia. Transphobia. But let's think for a moment about why we have men and women's sports at all. And the reason is quite simple. It's because there are real differences rooted in biology between the two groups. And because those differences are substantial, they involve things like muscle mass and so on. As a result, if you had only a single tournament, let's just say I just had Wimbledon. There's no men's Wimbledon, there's no women's Wimbledon. Everybody plays in Wimbledon. You award the best tennis player the title. The truth of it is not only would you have no women in the final or in the quarterfinal, but they wouldn't qualify at all. And this would be true pretty much of every sport. Out of 100 sports, you may have one or two teams that have a woman on them, but essentially women's sports as a practical matter would cease to exist. The reason that we have women's sports is a recognition that men and women being different as groups. The fact that there's variation within each group doesn't confuse the fact that there is meaningful difference or variation among the two groups. And when you make these statements, you're making strong generalizations that are true on the average and are not invalidated by exceptions. Consider this. Men are taller than women. True or false? True. Men are stronger than women. True or false? True. Now, these statements are not invalidated by saying, well, yeah, but, here's Dylan and he's really weak, and then there's Sarah and she's really strong. Here's Fred and he's 4'9". There's Sally and she's 6'2". These counterexamples or exceptions, if you will, do not invalidate the general rule. No. So you can, if you want, abolish women's sports, but then take the consequences of that. Or you can recognize that there are differences between groups, and you can recognize that competition makes more sense if girls compete against girls. They're competing, you may say, on a biological level playing field. Men compete against men for the same reason. The reason you don't want biological males in the women's tournament is that creates unfair competition, Sarah Silverman. Debbie and I have gotten to know Dr. Douglas Howard, who founded the company Balance of Nature. What a remarkable guy. He convinced us we're not eating enough fruits and veggies, even though we thought we were. There's an easier way than to eat the stuff you don't like. That's the Balance of Nature solution. Can you imagine how you'd feel if you were eating 10 servings of fruits and veggies every single day?
I started first, and now Dinesh is doing it too. We take 6 daily capsules, and we're set. We get all the vital nutrients sourced from 31 fruits and veggies every day. I also swear by the fiber and spice powder. I've never been more regular.
Join us and experience the Balance of Nature difference for yourself. For a limited time, all new preferred customers get an additional 35% discount and free shipping on your first Balance of Nature order. Use discount code AMERICA. Call 800-246-8751 or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code AMERICA. In a recent interview, George W. Bush, who has stayed out of politics recently, rarely makes public comments, but he did an interview with kind of a Never Trump group called The Dispatch, and he said that if the Republican Party, quote, stands for white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism, then it's not going to win anything. He was asked if he would leave the Republican Party in that eventuality, and he basically said, I wouldn't have to leave it. There won't be a party if that is what Republicans stand for. These comments, the latest, are kind of in line with things that Bush has periodically alluded to earlier. He was interviewed by NBC's Today Show about a month or so ago, and he worried that the Republican Party is, quote, isolationist, protectionist, and to a certain degree, nativist. Now, to Bush's credit, we need to say this up front, Bush actually made very good inroads in the Latino vote. Bush never did very well with blacks, but he did quite well among Latinos. And this is partly the reputation that Bush brought with him as governor of Texas. He was popular in Texas, and he was popular not just with whites, but also with Hispanics. Now, what Bush doesn't say, and I think this is the key omission, is that Trump greatly boosted his own black and Latino vote. Trump got 12% of the black vote, which was 4 points better than he did in 2016. By the way, nearly double the vote that Mitt Romney got, 7%. McCain got only 4% of blacks in 2008. Now, that was the year Obama ran. And when I think back to Reagan, Reagan had opened up the Republican Party. Reagan brought in, he brought in some Latinos, but he also brought in Jews. He brought in Catholics. He brought in a lot of young people. That's how I ended up in the Reagan White House. People say, Dinesh, you were 26 years old. How did you get to be, senior policy analyst in the White House? Well, the answer was that Reagan was very open to new types of people who had not been traditional Republicans coming into the party. Amazingly, the man who shut that down was George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush, I remember people were applying for jobs in the first Bush administration. It was like, how long have you been a Republican? Is your family a Republican? So this appeal to the kind of ancestral toothbrush mustache, umbrella-carrying Republican Party, George H.W. Bush moved away from that Reaganite openness, I would say. And the key thing with Trump is that Trump has, I think, worked hard. Trump worked hard to create a multiracial party that was nevertheless committed to the idea of America first. Now, it seems like for Bush, that's a contradiction in terms. If you're for America first, that makes you, chauvinist, and that makes you nativist, and so you're now going to scare away people of other colors. No, first of all, you don't scare away me. Second of all, you don't scare away minorities that believe in this American exceptionalism. The American exceptionalism itself is not color-coded. It can be appropriated for color coding purposes, but the solution to that, and I think Trump was always, think of the attacks on Trump for being a racist. Oh, he hates Mexicans, he hates immigrants. Despite all that, Trump increases his share of the minority vote. So The question for Bush to think about is this: which party has a better future with, let's say, Latinos? Is it going to be the kind of establishment Republican Party? Is it going to be the Republican Party that Bush left us, interventionist in a clumsy way on foreign policy, burning the Republican brand, a Republican Party that's no longer identified with fiscal, with government responsibility and frugality? So the Republican brand at the end of the Bush years, I'm afraid, was kind of tarnished. And what Trump did was restore not exactly the same brand, but perhaps a modified brand that fiercely committed to the American founding, American ideals, but nevertheless open to people of all backgrounds and all skin colors. So I think that Bush was making a little dig at Trump, but I don't think that he should make a dig at Trumpism. He shouldn't let the personal issue with Trump infect the larger issue, which is that Trumpism, or some version of Trumpism, is an essential recipe, I think, for the Republican Party going forward to win not just white votes or Anglo-Saxon votes, let alone Protestant votes, but to win the votes of all Americans. Does it make sense to you that the same company that controls half of online retail also passively eavesdrops on your private conversations at home? What about the idea that a single company controls 90% of internet searches, runs your email service, and gets to track everything you do on your smartphone? Big tech is more powerful than most countries are, and they profit by exploiting your personal data. It's time to put a layer of protection between your online activity and these tech juggernauts, and that's why I use ExpressVPN. Think about how much of your life is on the internet. Sadly, every site you visit, video you watch, a message you send gets tracked and data mined. But when you run ExpressVPN on your device, the software hides your IP address, something big tech can use to personally identify you. So ExpressVPN makes your activity harder to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your internet data to keep you safe from hackers and eavesdroppers on your network. And ExpressVPN does all of this without slowing your connection. That's why it's rated the #1 VPN service by CNET and Wired. What I like most about ExpressVPN is how easy it is to use. Download the app on your phone or computer, tap one button, and you're protected. So stop handing over your personal data to the big tech monopoly that mines your activity and sells your information. Protect yourself with the VPN I trust to keep me safe online. Visit expressvpn.com/Dinesh. That's expressvpn.com/Dinesh to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/Dinesh. One of the most remarkable developments in American politics, I would say perhaps the most remarkable, is the openness of Latinos and Hispanics to voting for the Republican Party. We saw this in the 2020 election. I've got some remarkable data here. This is from the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, which is the blue part of Texas, in fact, deep blue. Trump in McAllen, Texas, which is one of the region's largest cities, got nearly double the votes that he got 4 years earlier. And in the Rio Grande Valley overall, Biden won, but he won by 15 percentage points, a steep slide from Hillary's 39% margin in 2016. And what this means is that Latinos and Hispanics are giving the Republican Party, and gave Trump, a very careful look. Now, we're very lucky to have the chairwoman of the Hidalgo County Republican Party, Adrienne Pena-Garza, with us to help us make sense of these, I think, thrilling developments. And at this point, let me turn it over to Debbie, because this idea of turning the Rio Grande Valley red has been something that you've been talking about since as long as I've known you.
Right. Well, that's because that's my hometown girl, right? Before us. I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley from the age of 10 until graduated high school. My mother is from the Rio Grande Valley. She lives in Harlingen. And so I'm very rooted on the valley and the development of the valley, and the fact that wanting to turn the valley red has been a long-time dream of mine. So seeing people like Adrienne take charge and really educate Hispanics in the valley that are conservative, as to which party supports those principles and the platform that best describes them. So, Adrienne, how was Trump able to increase the vote turnout in the Valley for Republicans?
Well, he stood proudly for life. He stood proudly for border security, for traditional values here in South Texas, for law enforcement, for checks and balances, wanting to fight corruption. And I know, Mr. Denise, the work that you guys have done is incredible. I remember showing Hillary's America to members of my family, and they were shocked because the media here doesn't always share both sides of the story.
Adrienne, since you mentioned your family, you come from a family of Democrats. Your dad was a prominent political figure in the Valley, Democratic. And then it seems like around 2010, I guess this is 2 years into Obama, he decided to become a Republican, and so did you. Can you talk about first of all, tell us why you were so anchored in the Democratic Party? Because it seems like you're conservative in your convictions. And then what is it that turned the switch that made you go, I'm out of here, I'm going to actually give the other side a try?
Well, I actually attended college and I took my intro to political science class and I learned about the political spectrum. And I believe I had a Governor Susana Martinez moment of, hey, I'm a Republican. So my dad switching did have a lot to do with it. He helped give the Republican Party a supermajority in 2003. People were very kind and friendly to him in Austin. And he just learned more about, the differences of the party statewide and nationwide. Down here, we live in a bubble. The JFK Democrats, the MLK Democrats message has resonated here for a very long time. There's a lot of good conservative Democrats in the Valley that I believe are Republican. They just don't know it yet.
They don't know it.
I mean, this was Reagan,
Yeah,
right? Reagan said that in the Valley. And
That's right. He went to the Valley in 1980, and I got to see him. And he said, Latinos are Republican. They just don't know it. Well, I knew it. So, I've been a Republican since the age of 14. And again, I think it's wonderful that the Valley is turning that way. But Adrienne, what do you think is the greatest obstacle in turning all of the Valley red? How do you not convince all voters to vote Republican?
Well, going back to the media, unfortunately, the media has been sort of controlled by the Democratic Party for a very long time. The crab in a bucket mentality also kind of keeps things the way it is. But also, politiqueras. There are several candidates, elected officials that use politiqueras, and they pay some of the poorest communities to vote. And that is something that we deal with that's very, very difficult. We have good candidates on the ballot, but we don't pay people to vote. We don't bust people in to vote, and we don't threaten people at the polls. And there's a lot of that goes on down here. Unfortunately.
You're saying there's a fairly elaborate system of political corruption in which, in a sense, bribes are paid to people to turn up and vote a certain way. Is there a way to sort of bust that wide open, to expose that, to do a report on it that brings it to light so people can see what's going on and maybe some corrective action taken at the state level if possible? Does Governor Abbott know about this?
Well, I'd love to have a sit-down conversation with him about it. I think he knows a little bit to the degree, but I think it's up to us to, support our candidates and to expose. And I think people are afraid. They choose the devil that they know, so to speak, and so some of the people that don't support these candidates will still vote for them out of feeling like that's the only way to go. There's one person in particular that I'm thinking of that. He does use power boss type of mentality and does keep people the way they are and represents city entities and is also elected official. There are several documentaries that I'm sure you could do down here, Mr. Denise.
Well, when we come back, we want to probe this matter further and look to see there have been a couple of very close races and what can put Republicans over the top and what is the significance of all that when we come back. as leftist pressure mounts for student debt forgiveness, more stimulus checks, expanded unemployment benefits, a $2 trillion infrastructure plan, the question comes to mind, what's the economic impact of all this? Clearly, the Biden administration thinks they're playing with monopoly money. Now, for years, actually decades, I never invested in gold, just the stock market. But now I'm seriously worried about the regime we have in Washington. Absolutely no sense of fiscal responsibility. So listen, if all your investments are tied to greenbacks, you're sitting on a ticking time bomb. Invest a portion of your savings into gold and silver. Birch Gold Group is who I purchased from and who you can trust to convert an IRA or eligible 401k into an IRA backed by gold and silver. That's right. Through a little-known tax loophole, you can convert your retirement savings that's tied to the stock market into an IRA backed by precious metals. It's your hedge against inflation. Text Dinesh to 484848 for your free information kit on precious metals IRAs or to speak with a Birch Gold representative today. With 10,000 customers, an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, Birch Gold can help you too. Text Dinesh to 484848 and invest in gold before it's too late. We're back with Adrienne Pena-Garza, the chairman of the Hidalgo County Republican Party. We're talking about Hispanics and Latinos voting Republican. Adrienne, let me ask you this. It seems to me the great significance of this is not merely that Republicans, if Republicans could win a sizable minority, let alone majority of the Latino vote, they would lock up the state of Texas for the foreseeable future. Texas would not be under any danger of going blue. But it seems to me a second momentously important thing is that the left has been using this kind of woke ideology, the ideology of white supremacy. And nothing discredits that ideology more than Latinos, the country's largest minority, beginning to drift in the face of all these accusations toward the Republican camp. So do you see the real importance of what's going down in South Texas? And do you feel a sense of kind of almost historical importance in what you're doing down there?
Definitely. I see more women, stepping up to the challenge and wanting to run for office. We had a candidate by the name of Monica de la Cruz Hernandez that lost by 2 percentage points. And she is just a strong, fierce force to be reckoned with, very confident and a small business owner. And like myself, somebody who does struggle with dyslexia, dyscalculia, which is much like dyslexia, but empowered by what, President Trump, people will talk about, gosh, you guys are just big Trumpers. Well, it wasn't just about the red hat. It's about freedom. It's about knowing that we as individuals can support whoever we want, regardless of their color of skin, and, be empowered to help encourage others to hold the banner, because we won't be here forever, and it needs to continue. These conservative principles are worth fighting for.
Now, traditionally, the Republican Party has, I think it's fair to say, kind of neglected the Valley, probably because they thought it was solid blue. You have shaken that up. Is the GOP starting to take notice, not just at the state level, but at the national level?
I think so. And we do have more leaders like yourself that are willing to speak up for us. Who doesn't love the underdog, right? And, knowing that the main force that I believe is supporting us is God. The area is strongly, traditionally conservative. And I believe more and more Hispanics and more here on the southern border will wake up because of the Democratic policies that are moving so far to the left. Republicans, conservatives here in the Valley, I believe will see that we don't want an AOC America.
Right. And, every time we go to the Valley, I always have this sense of deja vu because I left the Valley in 1989. And I have to say, Adrienne, every time I go back, the only thing that's different to me are those windmills. I see that and I'm like, okay, this is not 1989 because of that. But everything else, the dilapidated buildings, the old houses, just the poverty. So perhaps maybe one of the candidates can do something like Kim Klacik, write a commercial like that where it shows this is where we've been, but this is where we're going. I'm going to get people out of poverty, and not by pandering to you and by giving you handouts, because we know that doesn't help people. it keeps them in poverty. And the Valley has been in poverty for many, many years. And no one seems to come out of poverty. So perhaps even that would be a great platform for future candidates.
Most definitely. I agree.
I mean, I think part of what Debbie's saying is the Hispanics, in a way, are at the crossroads. I mean, there is the Democrats have managed to essentially ruin a lot of African American communities, particularly inner city communities, by creating this kind of cycle of destructiveness and dependency. It's really hard to get out of once you get into it. I mean, is this a message that you can communicate to Hispanics and say, listen, there is the road of dependency. We can go down that road. It offers some short-term benefits, but long-term, it's very corrosive to our families and, in fact, to our traditional culture. Or we can take the road of upward mobility. You can say the road of the ladder that offers us hope and opportunity and offers us the American dream.
Definitely. Now, one of the things that I've noticed down here in the Valley is they'll have parades. A lot of these Democrats, they'll have trucks and they'll be throwing out candies at the community. And the people will run towards the vehicles to get candy. And so I think what you're saying has a lot to do with that. That we don't need to be just given things. We need to have jobs, job creation, economic development. Those are the things that are going to help us pick us up by the bootstraps.
I want to ask you a question about the border issue, because many people think that Latinos being on the border are great champions of illegal immigration, and that this is going to be a winning issue for the Democrats. How do people down at the border in McAllen, in Brownsville, in all those Harlingen, in those border communities, how do they feel about Biden's policies on the border?
Well, I can tell you because, I am a third to fourth generation Texan, but my husband is a first generation. So I hear both sides. And the cartel is profiting from this battle on the border. The going rate is $2,500 a person that the cartel is profiting. We had 170,000 cross illegally last month. This is not making our neighbors in Mexico very happy. Those that are crossing legally, that have crossed legally for work, they can't right now. But those that want to come illegally can come and go as they please. And it's a travesty that something needs to be done. Infuriating.
Well, we just want you to know that anything that we can do, the two of us, to help you down there, please let us know, because this is very close to Debbie's heart, but I also see the political significance of it. And so, if you need us to come down there, or quite frankly, if you need some bagfuls of candy to throw out from Republican trucks, we'll be happy. Why not?
We don't do that.
No, but the point about it is, if people look at candy, and candy symbolizes prosperity and abundance, and then yeah. I'm ready to supply some candy.
Wait a minute. Yeah, we like Adrienne said, we don't need handouts. People need to know that working for that candy is the way forward.
No,
right?
It is. But all I'm saying is, I'd also think the traditional Republican Party we're the party of Scrooge. Right. They're the party of Santa Claus. Who do you like better, Scrooge or Santa Claus?
Exactly. I know. But you know what, Adrienne, keep up the hard work, the good work, because that dream of turning the Valley red, I feel like it's going to be a reality, thanks to people like you that are working hard and helping with the message and the messaging.
Thank you. We'd love to cook, guys. So please, if you want to come to the Valley, we'll cook for you. You can stay with us. Let us know what we can do. All right. Thanks, Adrienne. It's a real pleasure. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much. Hey, who doesn't like to have comfortable, uninterrupted sleep? I sleep better when I have got the right pillow, the right sheets, and the right pajamas. I love wearing Mike Lindell's pajamas. Well, not his pajamas, the My Pillow pajamas, and they go very well with Mike's Giza Dream Sheets. The team at My Pillow is very grateful for you. They have an amazing offer, buy one, get one free, on their incredible sheet sets. Mike Lindell has come out with the world's most comfortable bed sheets. He found the best cotton in the world in a place where the Sahara Desert, the Nile River, and the Mediterranean Sea all come together to create the ideal weather conditions for growing cotton. His new Giza Dream bed sheets are made with this long staple cotton. Mike guarantees they'll be the most comfortable sheets you ever own. The first night you sleep on them, you'll really never want to sleep on
but anything else. The Giza Dream Sheets are available in a variety of colors, like all of Mike's products. They have a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. Right now, you can buy one, get one free by calling 800-876-0227 and use promo code Dinesh. For a limited time, buy one, get one free. Call 800-876-0227 or go to mypillow.com. Don't forget to use promo code DINESH, Dinesh. We're back, and I wanted Debbie to stick around because I wanted to ask her and talk about court packing. But before that, I got to ask you, my singing on the Lindell theme, awesome, right?
Ay, ay, ay. Chico.
Uh-oh.
What do you think Mike's going to think about it?
I think he's going to think it was...
Maybe he'll hire you to sing.
Maybe I'll be the official jingle for My Pillow. That would be a little scary.
Yeah, that was a good try, honey. It was really nice. I especially love the end with the promo code Dinesh.
The chorus.
Oh, that was beautiful. But
that's when I went deep, which is kind of showing my singing range.
Yeah. Awesome.
Anyway,
Yep.
let's talk about court packing, because the Democrats they want to pack the court now, and some people could say, why do they care about packing the court? The court hasn't been all that obliging to conservatives. But I think the court remains kind of an obstacle to them having full control of the government. They've got the House narrowly, but they still have it. They have the Senate, they got the presidency. They want the court. And so they've got this kind of, I would say, cosmetic, somewhat bogus commission stacked with left-wing academics. But this is a familiar story for you. And I want you to talk a little bit about how you've heard this song before.
Right. Well, I've heard a lot of these songs before. There are a lot of parallels, and we're talking about Venezuela, parallels with Venezuela. As you know, I have been telling you about these parallels for a very long time. One of them is court packing, which of course, I didn't really understand court packing as a parallel until I started hearing it coming out of their mouth, like recently, right?
You mean the Democrats?
The Democrats, and then when they were asked about it, they're like, "Oh, no, I'm not going to do that," or wait till after we are elected, and then we'll tell you the truth, right? So yes, so this story goes way back to Hugo Chavez and now Maduro. So when in 2004 in Venezuela they had a recall election, as you know, because Hugo Chavez was essentially trampling all over the Venezuelan constitution. Venezuela was a republic, and it had a two-party system. And although they weren't, the best two parties, they were the only two parties that Venezuela had. And so when Hugo Chavez came in, he started quickly changing things. But he really needed a court to finalize that change, right? And to finally push the Constitution beyond repair. So in 2004, when they had a recall election, actually ended up being rigged. They were using these machines called Smartmatic machines, not Dominion, Smartmatic machines that actually rigged the vote for Hugo Chavez.
Well, let's spell it out, because
Yes.
it's relevant to our situation.
Right.
The opposition party against Chavez was leading in the polls,
Right.
60-40.
Right, they were leading in the polls. They had all these exit polls, and the opposition was pretty sure that they were going to end up winning this election. And sometime at around maybe midnight, 2:00 in the morning, the counting stopped. All of that kind of ceased, and it ended up that. Apparently, and some of the opposition found this out later, the algorithms were completely, went haywire because it switched to Hugo Chavez winning this election and him not being ousted as they wished. And so anyway, he ended up not being recalled. And the same year, Chavez's allies held the majority in the National Assembly, and so they passed a law that increased the number of judges, Supreme Court judges, from 20 to 32. Of course, all in favor of Chavez's policies.
So in other words, in one stroke, they got 12 justices, they got an immediate decisive majority, and they now control the judicial branch of government, right?
Right,
Would it be fair to say that the Venezuela's judiciary ceased to be an independent judiciary.
Yeah, but it also, fast forward to 2015, and after Chavez's death in 2013, Maduro, his successor, did the exact same thing. He also put in, 16 more judges, all for the regime, and virtually they made it kind of impossible for any of the Constitution to even be intact. And so this was really the end of the Venezuelan Republic as they knew it. The court stripped the National Assembly, which is the Congress, of all its power. So basically it's the Maduro regime and the court, and they make all the decisions. And they strip the rights and liberties of Venezuelans forever. They're non-existent. And then to top it off, last summer, summer of 2020, they did this. They passed this court appointed, assembly called the National Electoral Council, and this is the agency responsible for conducting elections. And so this is to ensure that no one ever again will question the integrity of the Venezuelan elections.
I think it's interesting how in Venezuela the power seemed to move not just to one party, but to one man. So that Hugo Chavez, for example, could say things like, I want to change the Venezuelan flag. I don't like the fact that Venezuela is on Central Time Zone. I'm going to create my own time zone. I mean, these arbitrary decisions by one person, but now you've got an apparatus of rubber stampism, you could call it, both in the legislature and on the court, so that this one man's decisions are identified as the decisions of the people. And constitutional formalities are maintained even though the Constitution itself has disappeared.
That is correct. He pretends to follow a non-existent constitution.
That's remarkable. And do you think, we have seen now in numerous areas, from wealth confiscation, proposals for gun confiscation, proposals to change the electoral system here under H.R. 1, which would essentially federalize the election process. Is this just sort of one more nail in the coffin on the part of the left here to sort of take us on the road to Venezuela?
I believe it is. I believe it is. And this is a very scary parallel. And if we don't wake up as Americans, it's going to happen here.
And it's happened pretty quickly in Venezuela, right? In other words, Chavez was elected in the late 90s.
Right. So
here we are 20 years later, and the society is effectively gone.
Effectively gone. Really, it took 2 decades, really, to just completely, decimate that country. And as you know, and I've shown you photos of a very good friend of mine whose husband is a general. And so there are 2 societies in Venezuela right now, and we can talk about that later. But when you see photos, you're like, wait a minute. I thought they were eating their pets, and some are, and others are not.
Others are eating filet mignon, and that's because they have the Chavista T-shirt, so to speak, that
Exactly.
They're identified with the regime.
Exactly. But someday we'll do a show just on parallels, and people will be completely shocked at the road and the trajectory that we're going and headed towards.
As a final point, it's to me so dispiriting because the American era arguably began at the end of World War II. Starting in 1945, America was on top of the world. What you're saying is that if we follow the Venezuelan road, who knows, in a decade, maybe 2 decades, we could end up as not only losing our position in the front, but not even being in the front at all. And that would mean that the American era lasted from 1945 to, let's say, 2030, and our children and grandchildren will actually have a very different America.
And too many patriots from too many countries that witnessed this in their own countries came here to run away from that. So we have to work really hard that doesn't happen here.
I've got a really great deal for you on the movie Trump Card. I have such an eerie feeling when I think about this movie and how prophetic it has proven to be. It's based on my book, United States of Socialism. Isn't that where we seem to be headed? This is a good time, as good a time as ever, to watch Trump Card. Here's a short clip. Listen.
We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression.
Are we becoming the United States of Socialism? Who's behind it?
Our country should be more fearful of white man.
They control the black community, they control the black vote.
The president spoke tonight as if
they don't want to hear the truth, the media, and I almost feel like they gloat when there's a mass shooting.
My hands are being put in handcuffs, my ankles are shacked.
In a period of 18 months, I went through 23 different audits or investigations.
29 FBI agents with assault weapons.
Why it's evil. You know, here's a movie that will give you goosebumps. It not only shows you how we got here, but shows you the way out. Now, here's how you can get Trump Card DVDs at the incredible bargain price of $9.99. You got to get one for yourself and get some more as gifts. Here's how you do it. Go to salemnowstore.com. That's SALEMNOW store.com. You can order them there. It's time now for our mailbox. We love to get the questions, both audio and video. Send them to questiondinesh@gmail.com. I'll try to answer as many of them as I can. Let's go to today's question. Listen.
Hi Dinesh, Erica from the University of Pittsburgh here. My friend and I recently started our own business, and it's starting to gain a little bit of momentum, but my biggest concern is that our customers who are typically in their 20s and or enrolled in college expect us to follow woke ideologies. What advice do you have to continue to get new customers, but avoid getting canceled and avoid giving in to the leftist propaganda? Thanks, and keep up the good work.
Well, this is part of the strategy of the woke movement, is to use a cajoling, a bullying, a public pressure to try to get you to conform. Now, the good news is that there is a very powerful counter movement developing against this woke ideology. It's a little bit less vocal, but it's becoming more vocal. And what that means is there are lots of consumers who identify themselves as anti-woke. And the point I want to make is that for whatever products you make, you have to make anti-wokeism, meaning the opposition to this woke culture, cool. So it's not just that you stay away from it, you run away from it, because that increases the aggression of the left. Oh, this person's running scared. Let's run after them even faster. But rather, you turn around and go, big deal. I don't care about this nonsense. I'm actually going to make fun of it. I'm going to make satirical products that kind of thumb my nose at woke ideology. In doing this, you embolden the other side. You embolden people who go, I don't want my kids' propaganda. I'm a little sick of hearing this. And frankly, it doesn't comport with anything in my experience. This is ultimately a phantasmal, nonsensical ideology that is being imposed on me as a form of controlling me. Sorry, guys, I'm not up for it. So go take a hike. Here are my cool products. They're anti-woke. And by doing that, I think you build a new... So a combination of fearlessness and creativity, I think, is the recipe for your success.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and salemnow.com.